My name is Paul DeBettignies, the Minnesota Headhunter, and I'm next on the RecTech podcast.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
All right, it's time for RecTech, the only podcast that helps employers and recruiters connect with more candidates through technology-inspired conversations. If you listen, you'll hear both recruiters and HR tech vendors talk about how they use technology to find talent. This episode of RecTech is sponsored by our friends at Jobs in the US. If your company needs to hire more local talent, jobsintheus.com lets you post jobs for free on their national job search engine. They also operate 51 local state sites for every state in the country, including Washington, D.C. They've been online since 1999, so the job boards they power will help you connect with more local candidates. Learn more again at jobsintheus.com. And by the way, listeners, if you like this podcast, you'll probably like what I listen to in my car as I travel around. The Chad and Cheese podcast, for example. A couple of my recruiting friends, Joel and Chad, started a crazy podcast you got to check out. The snark is thick, the intel is good, and they don't pull any punches. Check it out at chadcheese.com. All right, our guest, he is the principal of Minnesota Headhunter, LLC, a Minneapolis IT search firm, and a frequent local and national speaker and writer on recruiting, HR, career, networking, and social media topics. And like me, he's an avid fisherman, and we follow each other's catches on Instagram. Paul DeBettignies, welcome to RecTech. It's great to talk to you.
Well, Chris, it's good to finally connect here, and looking forward to having a long chat with you about this stuff.
Definitely. So first of all, how's lake life? I saw your last catch was at a walleye yesterday.
Yeah, we had a sweet night last night. I asked Shelly, my girlfriend, like, hey, can we go down to the dock for 15 minutes? And she's like, yeah, I'll go with you. Thank God.
15 minutes.
I'm just casting. You know, we live on Lake Minnetonka, which is a large lake here in just west of downtown Minneapolis, and it's like actually a series of 8 bays that are all connected. Mm-hmm. And so I moved out here. I lived 13 years in the North Loop, which at one time was called the trendiest neighborhood in the U.S. I lived in downtown Minneapolis, moved out here to the lake, and we were going to get a boat, but one day we were catching fish in the middle of May, and then it was June, and then it was July, and like you said last night, it was like a nearly 5-pound walleye and just a pinch under a 4-pound bass just casting off my dock. So it's been all right.
Yeah, you got to like that, especially right off the dock. I just caught my biggest bass ever in Maine last week, probably 6.5.
What?
Off my kayak.
Well done.
Yep. I mean,
kayak?
In a kayak. It was pulling my kayak into the bulrush weeds. By the time I got it on, it took me like 2 minutes to get it on board. But it was pretty exciting. I was psyched.
Good for you, friend. Well done.
So I'm going to Squam Lake this Labor Day weekend. So hopefully 6-pounder number 2 is on its way.
Sweet.
All right, man. If I ever open my own search firm, I'm going to call it Top Order Talent. I think get that fishing metaphor.
Yeah.
Going, right?
Yeah, that's a great one. That'd be cool too.
Yeah, a lot of parallels there, fishing and recruiting, right? So.
Yes, there is.
Anyway, so first of all, I guess how's business these days? Tell me a bit about the whole Minnesota tech scene. What's going on out there?
Well, it's going through some changes and good ones at that. Business itself is good. About 5 years or so ago, I sort of got out of most of the day-to-day contingent search firm work I'd been doing. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine walked up to me who was a startup CEO, and he said, hey, I need to hire a PHP and iOS and Android engineer every quarter in 2013. He's like, I don't have the time, the energy, my network's tapped, and I don't have the funding to do contingent search fees. Are you interested? And I'm like, yeah. And he looked at me like I was from Mars. And the idea was, I knew there were a number of technology companies, startups, depending on definition of size of company, like those groups under the size of 50 who didn't have a recruiter, but who were recruiting. Mm-hmm. And the idea was, could I do some sort of consulting arrangement, sort of like a retainer from like attorney's will for the month. Here's what I'm going to charge you for the month. Here's what we're going to do. It's whether you get 2 hires or 5 hires over the next quarter. I don't care. I'm going to bill you this, and it allows me to still kind of bring in the revenue of a contingent search firm recruiter, but allows me to actually be a partner and sometimes an inside recruiter for the technology companies. And so now I'm more like friend and partner versus vendor.
Okay. So you're more like your own RPO kind of?
Sort of. So in one case, over 13 months. So mid 2015, I'm trying to do the dates now, mid-2015 to mid-2016, there was a company here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, called When I Work. And When I Work is an hourly scheduling app that's done really well. I think to date, they've raised $15 to $17 some million, which is a good number for Upper Midwest.
Yeah.
And so when I started with them, they were 50 people, and they didn't have a recruiter on staff. And so they used me for the next 13 months as their internal recruiter. And so I kind of dropped a couple of my clients, went to work with them full-time, raised the rate just a little bit, but it was a fantastic experience to prove my point of when companies are still not to that stage of being able to or wanting to hire a recruiter, there's still a lot of business out there to be had. So sort of RPO-ish, but it was just me, and I took on their engineering recruiting, then we added the data and the product team. And so then last summer when they started doing a search for a full-time recruiter, so I bowed out, took a couple months off, and then since then again, usually have 2 to 4 clients at a time. And there's enough of that. There's just enough business like that to be had. And so I enjoy that. I might be, there are contingent search recruiters in town who are probably making more than I am because I'm doing it this way now, but I am way more happy, way less stressed, and I'm fishing when I want to. And I'm good with that.
That's right. Got to get that fishing in. Paul, what other recruiting or HR tech companies are up there in the Minneapolis area? Branch Messenger is one, right?
Yeah, so Branch Messenger, and that's a new client of mine. So they are similar to When I Work. When I Work focuses on small, medium-sized business type groups. Branch Messenger is on enterprise. And so that's an interesting part of the tech story in the tech community here in Minneapolis is they moved from L.A. They relocated from L.A. to Minneapolis last summer to participate in the TechStars program. They started a retail group with that at Target Corporation in downtown Minneapolis. And so TIFF moved the team here. They were part of that accelerator program for 3 months, debuted during Twin City Startup Week. And then they just announced a $10 million round of funding, not 3 weeks ago, I guess. And that's when we started working together. So you have Branch Messenger. There's another startup in town called Structural that no one has heard of, even here locally really yet. It's coming out of Indianapolis. They're kind of doing offices out of both cities at the moment. Structural has this really cool technology. They have about 5 or 6 clients now. They are taking what I would fill out as an employee, like my background, my resume. They're then mining LinkedIn and other sites. And then I'm also offering up some more information about me. And they're combining all this information to find out as a sort of a retention tool. If they could put me into my next role, if they've got more information about me, what my interests and what my education are, they may be able to better suit my next role for me so that I won't end up going. So recruiting, but this is more about retention now and career planning for employees.
Right.
And so they'll learn that, I took 3 years of high school French. Maybe I know enough because they need to have someone do some sales work in Europe, as an example. So structural.com is the name of that group. We still have what was Jobs to Web when it got morphed or got acquired by, what the heck?
Success Factors?
Success Factors. And then, that was an interesting story. Jobs to Web got acquired like on a Saturday by Success Factors. It got acquired on Sunday by SAP. That's a number of years ago now. Yeah. So that group is still here in town and very large. We've got friends like Stephen Rothberg at collegerecruiter.com. Stephen's still doing his work there, doing really well. There are a number of small groups who have been coming up with some new technologies that I haven't even heard of. I heard of a group the other day during one of our big tech events. I'm like, who's that? So it's kind of that transition, in that space here in our town, too, where some groups have been acquired or moved on, and new ones are now popping up too.
Yeah. And we were talking offline about how some employers are making a big push to recruit outside of the area. So tell us more about that, if you would.
There was I just think about this whole idea of recruiting to the Midwest, and I did this Midwest Recruiting Boot Camp at the end of July. The idea that recruiting in the Midwest, in and to the Midwest, I've long felt has been different than it is like the Bay Area, Austin, Seattle. These pockets in these regions have pluses and negatives, and here's just a little bit different too. And so there was a survey that came out a few years ago that by 2020 we were going to be short 100,000 workers. Most of those are the college degree kind. And interesting now, right? We're halfway through 2017, so we're 2.5 years away from that, which kind of freaks a person out. Like, it's good for recruiters.
Yeah.
So the idea being is there was a debut of a regional hiring initiative a couple of years ago that felt very Fortune 500-like. A number of us from the startup and technology community. It was one of those like greasy wheel, gets the attention kind of thing. So we've been meeting for the last year and a half now to create tools for recruiters of all kinds, all sizes of companies, all industries. There's a bit of a focus on the technology recruiting piece, and the idea is that we don't have enough people going through our education system here, and there are not enough people moving here on their own that we need to, for lack of a better word, pour some gasoline on the fire.
Mm-hmm.
So we're recruiting from the outside in. So Twin City Startup Week comes up in October. Last year we did what was called a flying-in program. We flew 15 people in from across they applied. We flew 15 people, whittled it down to 15, and 2 people have since moved here from that. So now the goal for this year's Twin City Startup Week is to fly 50 in.
50.
50. And then something else that we're doing is to make it Greater MSP is the regional Chamber of Commerce for this. They founded this subgroup called Make It MSP. This is that regional hiring focus. So one of the things that we had been doing over the last year was doing lots of surveys, lots of ads, lots of talking to people to figure out who would be interested in moving to Minneapolis, St. Paul. An interesting thing, the top 3, not shocking, Detroit, Chicago, and Des Moines, given the Midwest focus.
Yep.
4 and 5, I would never have thought, Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. And then 6 was Dallas, Texas. 3 cities I would never have thought about recruiting technology people to get them to move to Minneapolis. And so as early as next month, maybe not until October, but it should be in the next month, we're actually 12 companies, including myself, are going to Chicago for a one-day meet and greet. Like, we're going to do the happy hour thing. We're going to go knock on Chicago's doors in the literal sense and say, hey, come take a look at the Minneapolis-St. Paul technology community and see if it's for you. So we're starting to get really aggressive.
Yeah, it sounds like you have to. I mean, other companies in the Minnesota area just a lot more willing to relocate people like that?
They hadn't in the past. I think over these conversations from this Make It MSP, these conversations for the last 3 to 4 years, it's just the realization that Best Buy can't just recruit on its own. Target, United Health Group, 3M cannot just recruit on their own. Chad Halverson, who's the CEO of When I Work, there was a documentary that was done by my friend Nick Roseth that debuted during Startup Week last year. Chad's in it. He's got this really awesome line that hasn't really gravitated yet because the Fortune 500 folks push back, but it's called Startup, Settle Down. Simple phrase. Mm-hmm. You can come to Minneapolis and St. Paul and work for a startup, or you can settle down in one of the large Fortune 500 companies. We've got you covered either way. Because Minneapolis, St. Paul has the largest number of Fortune 500 companies per capita in the country. So I think there are 16 or 17 groups on the list from here. So it's the idea that we also think about if you are hiring a VP of marketing, what does their spouse do and how do we help them land a job here too to make that transition better? So whether in technology or not, so the companies themselves are having this, I would hope the epiphany were bigger than it is, but it's still a noticeable one. Like, wow, we really need to start being really proactive and aggressively recruiting people, bringing them to town. That includes spouses and families and thinking about how do we help them land in school districts and help them buy a house.
Yeah, I think that branding, aspect of it is going to become much more important for companies and regions over the next few years as the market gets even tighter. So, and
the interesting part to it too is that we've got it nailed down to what do boomerangs want, who's from Minneapolis or the Midwest. What they want is different than someone who is a person of color from Chicago is different than someone who's married with kids in Portland.
Yeah.
So while we brag about like our arts community is only number 2, like the number of theater seats is only number 2. We're number 2 behind New York City. And we've got the 4th largest ad PR agency sort of a number of workers. But that doesn't appeal to everyone. Like, we have a huge foodie scene, but not everyone's a foodie. But we have been promoting foods and brewery as one of our big things. Mm-hmm. Actually didn't work for 2 of the 4 groups we were recruiting and marketing to. So when we talk about personas now, and well, not now, but many of us have been talking about it for a long time. Some people are just waking up to it. But so we're actually creating now personas to recruit for the regions that companies are now adopting here in town as they're recruiting in other parts of the country.
Excellent. So from one branding story to another, when did you get the idea to brand yourself as the Minnesota Headhunter? Tell me that story.
So it's actually not that great. What I mean is, I'm like, I should start a blog. Okay, so I spent about 10 minutes thinking about, hey, I should start one.
Yeah, and how long ago was that?
Literally how much? That was 2005.
2005, okay, so you've been doing it for 12 years now.
And I put it on TypePad because it was super simple and easy to do and looked way better than Blogger at the time. And I needed to come up with a name for it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I am this. I'm a Minnesota Headhunter. And so I literally went to GoDaddy and picked up mnheadhunter.com. And then 6 months later, Jim Durbin found me somewhere online. He was at that time, he's down in Dallas, Texas now, and he was in Seattle recruiting at the time, and he had stlrecruiting.com. He had been looking for the recruiters who were blogging in certain cities or regions. And so it was Jim Durbin doing STL recruiting, myself. Maren Hogan was at the time, her husband Jeremy and his dad were running a search firm in Omaha, Nebraska. So their blog was the Big O.
Oh, yeah?
And then there was another gentleman blogging in Denver. So while having these conversations with Jim and him sort of enlightening me on SEO and things, he's like, why don't you just call yourself the Minnesota Headhunter? I'm like, because I'm from the Midwest. That sounds arrogant. That sounds too forward to be the. Right. He goes, well, why didn't you pick up MinnesotaHeadhunter.com? I'm like, oh, damn. Oh, sorry. Well, anyway, but I said, oh, damn. And he's like, yeah, you should probably go do that. Literally, that's the thought to it. It is not some 4-month branding exploratory thing of, this is what I am. So I stumbled into it. Now, I will tell you that it was easily the best thing. Like, there are 3 things that have saved my career during recession. Mm-hmm. Well, the first one was the .com post 9/11. I was single. That saved me. I had just been recruiting for 2 years when it happened.
Yeah.
Starting the blog in 2005 and Twitter. The blog and Twitter were the 2 things that saved my career during that last recession, during the Great Recession, because people had for a long time had a chance to get to know me and who I was. And so when we had the boot camp, I did a recruiter branding presentation, and really it was my story. And so there's one of the people who attended has already now started her own blog. And so she's going to talk about the company that she's working at. So she's running her first 15 blog posts before she actually lets anybody know what's out there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, besides that, when you have the last name DeBettignies, like, it's hard to spell, it's hard to pronounce.
Okay.
So, and then I also learned over time that the SEO to that was pretty simple, right? So if you're in Google and you do a search for either if you search for Minnesota Recruiter, I think I'm the first 2 search results. If you do Minnesota Headhunter, I'm 3 or 4 of the 10. And then for Minnesota IT jobs, I think I'm number 5.
Right.
And so, depending on the economy and where we are, those search results and the referrals from Google go up and down. But most folks don't know how I was at a closure meetup. One of the startups here in town was using Java, and they're running most of the code in Clojure now. And one of the folks actually said, "Oh, hey, you're the guy who writes that blog." That's all they know. You're that guy.
That guy.
And I don't care, because I'll take that. If that's all they know,
right,
that means they'll at least talk to me.
Yeah.
And so that usually was the smartest thing I ever did.
Nice. I was talking to Harry Joyner a few podcasts ago, and
Harry too. Yes, he would have been one of those from back in the day.
Right. He's got ecommercejobs.com, and he told me that it's really, it's become a giant referral engine for him from both a candidate and client perspective. So has your site done the same for you?
It has, but I wouldn't call it giant, because Harry's going after just that much larger, the e-commerce jobs thing. So I loved from Harry, and he and I started doing it at the same time, where we were naming our clients. Like, this is who we're working for, even doing contingent searches, because I learned that most candidates won't go around a contingent recruiter because they don't know where to go anyway.
Yeah.
So if Harry and I were doing almost exactly the same time, it was like validation for me that I was on the right path with that. But when you say Minnesota, and then when you say technology community, it's not a massive referral engine now, because now it's we're talking about like 2 subsets deep.
Yeah.
So I do. Almost everyone who reaches out to me says, "Hey, either I saw you on Twitter, I saw that sunset photo on Instagram, or I've seen a couple of your blog posts. Do you have time to chat?" And that's sort of the idea that I know that what I'm doing is working. And two is that it's not contrived. Like, this is just who I am.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Gopher football fan, so I will be posting photos from the tailgate Thursday night. We have our kickoff is Thursday night against Buffalo University. So I post stuff, but I also post a lot of client stuff. Like, there's a photo with a tip from Branch Messenger and I from a couple of weeks ago. It's a snapshot of who I am and what I'm doing and what I'm up to, and people get a chance to get to know you. And if your voice, when you write, sounds like when they talk to you, because mine is, like my aunt and I don't talk much just because of time and distance, but she goes, when I read your blog, it's like you're talking to me. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm having a conversation with you. And so I think some people get really uptight about this. I'm only going to post certain kinds of photos at certain times, and I'm only going to tweet about certain topics. And I'm like, now other than politics, I don't tweet about politics anymore for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But the brand itself, I guess it's me. And I think that I don't take it that seriously. I try to feed it when I can. But at the end of the day, I'm still just a recruiter first and foremost anyway.
Well, let's talk about recruiting a little bit, and specifically the technology you use to recruit. So do you have an ATS, first of all? Do you use an ATS?
So I started using sendouts way back in 2002, migrated over to Bullhorn. I'm looking for another tool. Speaking of Jobs to Web, Doug Berg, who was the CEO of Jobs to Web, has a startup here in town called TrackIf. Was called TrackIf, now called My Alerts. And what he's doing is it's mostly on retail focused. You can go to Best Buy site and in your account you can say, well, when that large screen TV gets to $1,100, notify me so I can go buy it. Maybe it's at $1,450 right now. Doug so it's very retail focused, but he had a concept of a product that was also for recruiting. So it was like, to me, it looked like Jobs to Web 3.0. Mm-hmm. And the idea, I need it. I just haven't found anybody who has it. And I think Stacy Sapar had mentioned this on Facebook a month or so ago. I need a tool. So if anybody has the tool, let me know. I need a tool where I don't need someone to get into my applicant tracking system. I just need them to leave some info behind. Leave me a nugget. Leave me a GitHub URL. Leave me something from Stack Overflow. Give me your LinkedIn profile. Answer these 5 really relaxed, laid-back questions. Like one of the things I did when I worked, because it very much fit their culture, was send me a resume. That's cool. A summary's fine. LinkedIn, GitHub, Stack Overflow. Send me a good haiku type feel to it. And the number of good haiku, they were always the first chance I replied to, by the way. If you sent me a good haiku, you're who I need to talk to.
Right.
But I need an applicant tracking system, but I need something that allows people to be, I hate the phrase passive and active candidates, but I need something that allows someone to say, I'm just interested.
Right.
I'm curious. There was a startup here that I was an advisor for a few years ago called Toggle Green. And I'm hoping that someone will come up with it. The idea was green, yellow, red, like a stoplight. And in this case, we were targeting the technology community. Red meant that a recruiter could see just like a gray, the standard gray photo, avatar.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It wouldn't say your name. It wouldn't say where you worked at, but it would say Ruby developer. And it would say 10 years of this, 5 years of this, 2 years of this, and what you're looking for. Yellow would give the person's photo, but kind of blurred out, so you couldn't figure it out. I think it said company name, but I still couldn't exactly figure out who Chris Russell probably was. But it will let me know that you're starting to look. And then a green, hence Toggle Green, was Chris Russell's looking.
Yep.
And I can see his stuff. But Chris Russell was the one who managed the recruiter relationships. It's not like on LinkedIn. You were letting your 10, it could be 25 recruiter friends know that you're starting to look now. I need something like that.
So where you can follow a candidate that you're interested in as a recruiter, right? And follow them along their career journey and get notified when they're ready. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think there's something to that. I've always
me that, man. Oh, stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like a like a job wanted site, right? Where it's basically it's candidate focused, not job focused. Where your candidate goes out, describes themselves, and they tell you where they want to work, who they want to work for, and what they're good at, and what they would move for, right? What they would actually change jobs for would be an interesting database to search. So,
I'm looking for a new role because it's now coming up later. So someone could turn it sort of on now, saying, "I'm looking for a new role. I want to be sitting somewhere else, whatever the first Monday after January 1st is."
Yep.
And so you would, as a recruiter, you would get the notification from that person because you had a relationship with them. You saw them and met them at a user group. You spoke at a PHP meetup. They like and respect you. They want you to know that they're looking.
Yeah.
So I'm not so hyped on the current stuff that's out there. And that's not a knock on anybody. It's that I'm a pretty simple guy. I need my website, my email. I need my blog to work. I need my phone, right? People always laugh. My three biggest still tools are my business card, my cell phone, and a handshake. It still just is for me. So I'm not a whole big tool gadget guy, which always, when Durbin was up here, Tim Sackett and I were talking, what are you using, man? And I'm like, nothing that cool.
How much are you on LinkedIn these days? Is it a part of your daily activity?
That's a good question. It because I kind of have transitioned my spring summer clients now to the late summer fall ones. I've been back on it more again, because we're searching for some different skill sets and technology that developers are using. I still think it's a very important tool, but it never was the tool for me, and it still isn't the tool for me today.
Yeah.
There's also, there's a tech event here in town.
Did you see the new feature they came out with today, which is in the messaging section, they tell you now if the person's active, whether they're on mobile or desktop. There's a green icon that indicates that. However,
that's cool.
Yeah, well, I thought it was cool at first, and then I was looking at it more. I'm like, okay, if I go to the person's profile, I don't see it at all. So I only see it in the messaging section.
Oh.
And that's only if you've actually messaged that person at some point where they show up.
Sure.
So I'm like, okay, how useful is this now? Right? If it was on their profile and I knew they're a candidate I'm looking to pluck, that'd be great. And they could tell me they're online right now. I could send them a message that would, improve the
literally, yes.
But I thought it was a little bit shortchanged there. I don't know. I think it's a nice feature, but I think they could go more. They could do more with it if they wanted to.
I remember, I hate to do that back in the day, but back to the MySpace days.
Yeah.
MySpace, they still had back then, it was the best social network to recruit from was MySpace because people were putting their company name and who they worked for and what they actually did. And so you could see them when they were online and you could send them a message. I truly miss those days. I think that, but everybody said MySpace was the thing forever, right? And then it tanked and then Facebook came around. Sooner or later, someone's going to come up with an alternate to LinkedIn. And if we have to continue to, again, Jim and I had the conversation about at some point in time, you're going to have to log in with your Microsoft account. Well, I understand why Microsoft acquired LinkedIn. I get it. At some point in time, someone's going to come up with an alternative, and it's going to take off to some extent. It's going to. There's enough pissed off, frustrated people.
Yep. I think in 3 years, we're going to see some kind of the next LinkedIn, whatever it is.
And, and I'll continue to use LinkedIn because it's still a really cool tool, but it's not the end all. It never was going to. It wasn't. It wasn't the first days, right? When you actually saw all of LinkedIn, right? When Shelley Steckel taught us how to do those original Boolean search strings. Yep. And you had 6 degrees, right? It was Kevin Bacon, 6 degrees of the separation. The good old days, that's when LinkedIn was awesome for recruiters. But you do have to monetize, and you do have to create revenue streams, and I get all that stuff. But I just think it's become a less friendly tool, a less important tool for most recruiters.
Interesting. All right. So tell me a story, Paul, about your most creative find in terms of finding a candidate out there that you were kind of proud of. What comes to mind?
Well, so I kind of have two, and the first one might be the one I'll talk about most. It's actually the two stories really aren't the most creative or where I dug the deepest. It's the part about having that brand or that sort of reputation in town. The first one was, and I did this during that recruiting brand thing I did a couple of weeks ago at the boot camp. I tweeted out that I was going to be attending, what was it, Node? I guess the hashtag doesn't matter. This is a few years ago. No, we'll call it Node Summit. So Node being a JavaScript framework. So I did my usual recruiting. I'm going to be attending, hashtag Node Summit. Who else is going to be there? And a couple of buddies of mine reply back. That's at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm an introvert by nature. Most people don't know that, but I really am. I'm an introvert by nature, and I will sit in the back of every user group meeting that I'm at. Now, Node Summit, if that's what it was, whatever it was called, had probably 150 plus. Like it was like a traveling show that they were doing to promote Node as a framework.
Okay.
So I'm literally sitting in the back row while doing my recruiter work because I don't want to be in the third row having people going, why is this guy not paying attention? But I don't know what they're talking about. Like I'm getting bits and pieces. So I take a photo, put it on Twitter and LinkedIn that I'm here. Let's call that 6 o'clock. So 2 o'clock I tweeted, 6 o'clock I posted on there.
Okay.
At 7:25, I get a LinkedIn invite from a guy in the second row. He's like, hey, I'm here too. Can we talk later? Now, he was a .NET person and not someone who I was immediately looking for or had something to do, but I actually referred him on to his next contract.
Yeah.
18 months later, I did place him though.
Score one for Twitter.
And so, yeah, so it literally just was, I'm here, and I do this at user groups. I attend, not since I moved in spring, because I'm still trying to get my bounds. I'm now a half an hour west of town versus 3 blocks. But this coming Wednesday, I'm going to go to the DevOps Minneapolis meetup. And so I will tweet that I'm going. I will tweet that I'm there. I'll post a photo. And I want to promote the group because it's a fantastic group. They've got a SPS Commerce, which is now a recent sort of former client of mine. They host a meetup, and they have about 150 DevOps engineers attend every month, which is a huge turnout for Minneapolis. I mean, frankly, it's 150 is big in any town now that I think about it. But I'll tweet that I'm there, and I'll tweet that Branch Messenger is looking for an engineer, and I'll still promote that SPS is hiring cloud engineers. Undoubtedly, 2 to 4 people will walk up to me afterwards, usually of the junior variety, less experienced folks. So be like, hey, I've got a question about a job search, or a very seasoned person will walk up to me and ask me about their salary review that's coming up. I don't usually think of it as I'm going to the event to recruit someone who's here for today. It's always 3 to 6 months from now. The other story is I was on my way to SourceCon last September. And, it was a year and a half ago, it was that spring. I was on my way to SourceCon, and I'm on the light rail stations on my way to the airport. And at the time, I was still with When I Work, and we were looking for iOS and Android engineers. So the gist of it is, these 2 guys to my left are talking about that what they had been working on that day, and it was clear that they were both iOS developers. And the one goes, man, I just can't find a really good remote job in town. There's nothing around here. And my ears perked up, right? I leave my suitcase.
Clear radar.
I walk up. Yeah, I'm on the light rail. I leave my suitcase. I walk 10 feet over and go, hey, I don't want to be creepy. It was actually my reason. I don't want to be creepy.
That was your opening line?
But I overheard, I heard the conversation. And I'm a tech recruiter in town. And I'm helping the group When I Work. Are you familiar with them? One guy says yes. I go, we're looking for iOS folks, and we are hiring a remote team. The other guy turns to me and goes, you're the dude who posts the sunset photos on Instagram. I'm like, yeah? It was a bit of this kind of weird, again, but Minneapolis is a really large, small town. Yeah. So if it's not 6 degrees, it's 2.2 of separation. The one guy, he wanted to stay as a contractor. I gave him I don't even know what had happened with him. The other guy, I interviewed with him. He wasn't a good fit for us, but I ended up sending him on to a larger tech group in town that he got hired at. So not as a feed, that just as a friendly sort of thing. Almost all of my stories, though, are those. They tend to be less deep sourcing. Well, that's not true. They can be deep sourcing, unlike those two. They can be deep sourcing, but then immediately it turns to a relationship. Who do I know who knows them?
Yeah.
Harry Mills at Indeed gave a great presentation at SourceCon, and it was about personalizing messages and how to get a better email response. I actually get about 65 to 70% response on my in-mail and email. And part of it is because, like, I've been around a while. And, you leave enough nuggets in the forest, popcorn trail in the forest, right? Leave enough pieces of popcorn, people will remember you.
Yep.
And two is that in every email I send, I actually offer up that person a link to a topic, an upcoming user group event, a recent salary survey, like something that's actually giving to them.
Okay, so you're adding value to them?
It's just a simple thing. I would want you to send something if you send something to me, Chris, I'm hoping that while you are looking to see if I'm available, hey, by the way, did you see that Twin Cities Startup Week is the second week in October?
Right.
Something that says, I live and work here, I'm a part of this community, I'm engaged and involved. So my lessons tend to be not quite so sourcing, deep dive, right? Like I'm not doing like Dean DaCosta or Amy Beth or anyone like that. I'm not doing like 17 open tabs.
Right.
Like mine is, but I'm also not searching around the country. Like I'm constantly searching here in town. And the idea is that I think in the Bay Area, right, you can go through 100 iOS developers, another 100, another 100, another 100, another 100. And here you run out after the third round.
Yeah.
That there aren't more people to source. It's that we actually have to create sort of, I hate to say brand recognition, but just like contact points of familiarity with people so that when they do, I always say, like, I don't need to be the one person you call, just let me be one of the three you call.
Yeah. Well, what happens when you run out of people to source? I mean, I'm sure it happens to you, right? So where do you go from there?
Do you repeat the question because my phone cut out there for a second. I was getting the call.
Yeah, no problem. So what happens when you run out of sources candidates to source? I mean, where do you go from there?
So then I start getting into actually like other places, so the meetup.com site, like every meetup in Minneapolis, every technology meetup in Minneapolis, St. Paul has a meetup.com page. Mm-hmm. Almost they're all there now. And a lot of times, right, people aren't putting their photo, they're putting John or Julie. And, they'll say who they are, but you have no way of being able to find out who they are, where they do it at. But that's though when I start figuring out when was the last time they attended an event. And I'll try to figure out who else attended the event that same night. And I'll start trying to put some pieces together. It's really hands-on and it's really time-consuming. Mm-hmm. But there's the trend in town here, and it has been for the better part of 2 years, that a lot of technology people are pulling their LinkedIn profiles off.
Yeah.
They're either shutting them down or having them go quiet. Like you can't find them. And I think it's the part about where are all the other places that one can look, but you really got to spend some time. Like, again, personalizing messages takes a lot of time, but
you're really leveraging those offline organizations and events to kind of back up your online sourcing efforts, I guess, right?
And so then, so then there are, so whether it's Connectify or any of those where I can pull up the rest of the social media profiles to try to piece something together. This goes back to that idea of that, it's sort of applicant tracking system that you and I spoke about at the beginning. I want someone to be able to put that thing together for me where I can, like hire a tool or anything like that, Profit, whatever the old school ones were too. To make it easier for us to find the popcorn trails that Chris Russell or Paul DeBettignies have left behind so I can create a better idea of who this person is. But I want it to be, and it'll get there, but I want it to be 5x more than it already is. Not in terms of people, but in terms of information.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And I think that we can start finding those folks then that aren't so easy. When Glenn Capey says, do a search string. When you search on LinkedIn, start on the last page, the last person, not the first person on the first page. That's the sourcing that I tend to do because I know everyone's contacting these 10 people because they're the most popular kids in town. I want to find out who their 10 friends are. And that's sort of the sourcing that I do. That's a little bit deeper than most, I think.
All right. So, Paul, what let's talk about companies a bit in terms of what they're doing wrong as far as promoting themselves and not practically reaching out to candidates. You had a post on your blog, I think it talked about, they're not they're burying their career link at the bottom of their website. Why don't they put it on top? So what kind of things like that are you seeing them doing wrong these days?
Well, that was the first one that was glaring to me. And what it is, I've been posting recruiter jobs on my blog since I was 2 years in. The idea was if I am this node of information at times, like let's post companies, Best Buy, Target, United Health Group, it could be Branch Messenger one day when we need to hire one, like post your recruiter jobs on my page too, and hopefully I can network and you all can, find who you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But it was while I was doing that the other day where it was, like job post after, or career page after career page was at the bottom, the link was at the bottom of every web page. But why, if recruiting is really that hard, if you really are spending this money on SEO, if you really are blowing that much money on LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever you are, why wouldn't you also just put front and center, we're hiring?
Yes.
On the navigation bar at the top of your website.
Amen, brother.
Like it could be jobs or careers, or why not? And there is someone in town, and I can't remember who it is. It's actually, there's the website, the color is sort of like a pale blue. But in bright yellow with like a red starry kind of thing, it says, we're hiring.
Yes. You have to shout it.
I don't want it to, I don't want it to be GeoCities Flash 1998. Right? I'm not looking for that kind of a thing to attract people. But like that was so, like, I don't know why I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but I was also kind of in a ranting mood, so that's why I wrote the post. Like, why? If you're, so the two examples I gave were General Mills, which everyone has heard of, or most everyone, right? And then Kitsu, which is a 40-person startup here in Minneapolis. Like, why wouldn't you put your jobs like way up there, or worse, sticking it in a navigation drop down, or then even worse, that your careers page is part of your About Us, and it's not actually its own page.
Yeah. It's a lot worse with tech industry is a lot better about this stuff, but it's worse in like manufacturing, healthcare, those types of industries. I mean, I saw a healthcare company the other day; they had their job postings still in PDF format.
Whoa!
I mean,
actually,
yes,
there are
seriously.
2 tech companies in town now that I think about that have their
really.
They're hosted actually on. I think the one is actually on. Do you go to Dropbox or Box, wherever you go?
Google can't index a PDF, text on there. I don't think so.
Right. Like, I think it's those things. This is a positive thing, and I haven't looked to see if they're still doing it, but I think they were till at least a couple of months ago. United Health Group, headquartered here in Minneapolis, had been for a really long time. I think they're still doing it. They will host live chats. I'm making this up. Every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central, you can hop into our chat window and talk with a tech recruiter.
Okay.
Like, that's just awesome. Like, it's one person's time. A lot of the questions over a period of time will be the same, copy and paste, post, right? But give some sense of that we're here and we are listening and we want to communicate with you. I think most companies, if you look at the career pages, it's like, again, it's still jobs at, resumes at. I can't believe a tech recruiter today, regardless of where they're posting a job, on their career page, on LinkedIn, it could be Craigslist, Stack Overflow, don't care. Why not post your email address? Like, are you really fearful that you're going to get 55 applicants? Because if you are, then that's the best problem in the world to have.
Exactly.
My friends at SPS Commerce have started doing something, and I'm glad they are. When a recruiter posts that they're looking for like a DevOps engineer or a Java engineer, they'll name the hiring manager. You want to go work with Chris Russell.
Yes.
With a link to Chris Russell's LinkedIn profile.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Paul. Every job posting today should have the words, who does this position report to, in my opinion. People want to know who they're going to work for. All right, you have to give them that information because people quit their bosses in many cases. So
and it puts the pressure on the hiring managers to be putting out content and being responsible and getting back to people. But so I'm doing a hiring manager boot camp this fall, too, for a couple of groups in town, which is to say the hiring managers said we want to know how to be better partners with our tech recruiters, but we don't know how. The tech recruiters are frustrated and angry, so they're going to have me do it instead, which is probably a good way to do it. But part of it is this, like you have your network, so to give the hiring managers a social media calendar to say on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're going to put something on Twitter. I don't care what it is. Do something so that when Chris Russell or Paul DeBettignies interview with you, when we do look for you online ahead of time, we get some sense of what you're thinking and talking about. Again, I can understand why we might get a little walled off, for a lack of a better word, during a recession. when lots of people are looking for jobs
right.
and maybe applying for ones that they're not qualified for. Like in Minneapolis, the tech job market came off the bottom around March of 2010. So we are 7+ years in the rear view window of this.
Yeah.
Yet we're still making it so hard for a technology person to actually reach out to us and have a conversation with us.
I like what if you've ever seen Stack Overflow, their career pages, in the job description itself, it says something like who you'll be working with, and then it links out to each of those coders' profiles on Stack. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, that's to me transparency and authenticity to its height.
Some of the startups here in town are doing that too, right? Where they still will post the photos and the names of everybody who worked there, and of course, then people say, "Well, aren't you worried about retention? What if someone steals your person? How about don't suck as a company and you don't have to worry about it?"
Exactly.
I mean, to be blunt, right? Like, it was Stack Overflow. I saw something over the weekend while I was it rained here for most of the weekend, so I was kind of nerding on reading things. And one of them was, of course, developers want to know who they're going to be working with. Like, how smart are they? Like, what's their background?
Yep.
But we're all that way.
Yeah, obviously.
Generally speaking, I think that most people want to know who they're going to work with, what's it going to be like. A couple of groups in town have recently now taken off their stock photos, and they are posting photos of their actual people like in a meeting.
Took them long
Shocker.
enough.
Well, so it's those things when we ask them, what are people not doing? How about let's just actually, again, like, I get that I'm a connector and I love people most days. Most people like me, and most days I like most of them.
Yeah.
But I think that and Susan Burns and I had a conversation so many years ago where she said, Paul, she goes, it seems like everything in HR tech is doing everything they can. They say they want to create connections between people, but every piece of software is making it harder.
Yeah.
And that was, she said that to me, man, that's got to be 7 years ago.
Wow.
And I would still say it's true today, that every time someone comes out with something, it actually creates more barriers between us and that person.
Yeah. Well, there's never been more HR technology than there is right now, and it's only getting worse. So, and HR is struggling to catch up with that. I mean, it's no wonder it's happening because they're not techie people. I mean, we're throwing all this technology at them, and they have no clue how to make it work, right? So it's going to take them time to figure that out. So anyway, well, Paul, it's been an awesome conversation. I think I've learned a lot today about you and how you recruit. I guess my last question to wrap this up is, as you think about the future of recruiting, what's one thing you're worried about in terms of, getting talent, recruiting people, hiring? What would you say is on your mind?
I think it goes back to the training of people to do the job. We can have all these really cool, even if all these HR tech tools work out someday, you still need a human, a recruiter, an HR generalist, a hiring manager to be able to actually use the thing effectively. It's why, I started the Minnesota Recruiters Group, back in 2007, ran into 2012, and the idea was, and we created it into being the largest regional recruiting group and the most active one in the country. And so my idea for the boot camp was, how many people have come into our space since the recession ended, right? Recruiting doesn't have a barrier to entry in most cases, and particularly if you talk about the search and consulting firm recruiters. Most corporate recruiters, when they're coming out of college, it's their gateway into another part of HR. So for me, I'm worried about training of people, and if employer branding. Let's assume employer branding is important. Let's assume that reputation in a town is important. But if you've got a recruiter who, for lack of a better word, sucks, like, how many people are they annoying and pissing off in a week, in a month, and a year?
Yeah.
Like, what's the damage, the actual revenue damage from that? And so I think that it's the idea that everything from like messaging to candidate experience to I don't think that recruiting stops at recruiting and being hired, but I think we should be involved in some form, particularly the inside folks or the consultants should be involved in the retention. We still know these people that were hired better than anyone else does inside a company for the first 6 months. Yet recruiting stopped. And what about recruiting to constantly recruit to keep your people there? I think recruiting has, I just think we've lost it Like, again, it used to be posting praying on the job board, and now we're posting praying on LinkedIn and social media. We're shocked when it doesn't work. But I just think that we're not, I think our industry, so whether it's ATAP or anything else, the idea of just training, like Tim Sackett's next Michigan Recruiters Conference is September or October. Like, I love these regional initiatives. Like, anything that gets a group of people in the room. SourceCon now is doing people are holding meetups now across the country.
Yep.
I love that. Freaking love that, because that's when the cool stuff happens, is when people are getting together and they're sharing. And the thing I went to the University of Wisconsin, I'm sorry I'm rambling now, but the University of Wisconsin, Madison, they have something called E-Business Consortium. Kind of a big, long sort of thing, but what they do is they bring employers from across the state to talk about marketing, PR, HR, and this particular one was about recruiting. We did a thing on recruiter and employer branding. Two of us gave a presentation in the morning. That afternoon, we did open, it was whiteboard type things on the easels with marker and paper. They were so free, because they knew each other now from years. They were so freely sharing their secret sauce. So one company said their name tag says, we were just talking about this, their name tag says, the future employee of, and it lists the hiring manager's name. That's the name tag. So that when that person's now walking around that facility, everyone knows that they're interviewing, and everyone can say something nice about that hiring manager. Johnsonville Brats did something like, it was really cool. They give everyone who interviews at Johnsonville Brats a gift certificate, whether it's $5, $10, didn't matter. I don't remember. The gist of it was that the phrasing of it was something like, thank you for letting us grill you for the past 2 hours. Have some on us.
Right.
And I just sat there like, that's the stuff that connects people with a company, with a brand. Like, how do you not like that as a candidate experience?
Right.
So I think it's this training piece. It's aren't we giving our recruiters, HR professionals, the tools they need to do their job, but also to take the next steps after that? I think that's it's exciting and fearful at the same time.
Well, Paul, thank you for educating us today. Certainly appreciate the information. I learned a lot, and I hope the listeners did too. How can people connect with you online?
They can go to www.mnheadhunter.com. If you just do a search for MN Headhunter, you'll find me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, anything like that.
All right, well, keep those catches coming, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for hanging out with me, friend. I appreciate it.
Definitely. That's going to do it for this edition of the RecTech Podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor. Remember to check out jobsinus.com for your local hiring needs. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com. You can find the audio and links for this show on our blog, and subscribe via iTunes, Google Play, or even SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, everyone.